Hello everyone, welcome back. We got another news video here to discuss. We're discussing some signings that have happened over the past couple of days, some injury updates that have happened over the past couple of days, and we're taking a quick look at some of the big ramifications coming out of the NHL trade deadline. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the NHL channel. Before we get into the video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. I'm able to with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. And don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below, so I'll discuss in today's video. Now, as usual, I'm going to start today's video off by discussing a couple of signings. We've had 3 that we haven't mentioned yet so far, so we'll get to all those here. First, the Canucks have signed undrafted right shot defenseman Christian Felton to a 1-year ELC that'll begin at the start of next year. That has an AAV of $870,000. It's a pretty good deal for the Canucks. I mean, Felton has been playing over in the NCAA. He's actually been doing quite well. Last year he had 2 goals and 6 points in 32 NCAA games. This year had 3 goals and 7 points in 26. So he looked quite well. He's now signed, so he should be able to be a solid right shot defensive prospect there for the Canucks. I'm not sure if they'll ever amount to anything, but I think eventually he could potentially be something like a third pair defenseman. So that's a pretty good pickup there for the Canucks. Getting a younger player who's coming out of college who they can use in their AHL affiliates, and also who can be a really good prospect for him. So this is a pretty good pickup there for the Canucks. The Dallas Stars signed 2023 second-round pick Tristan Bertucci to a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $878,000, and deal will begin at the start of next year. So that's a pretty good deal in my opinion for Bertucci. Now, he's been playing over in the OHL this year. Last year put up 11 goals and 50 points in 63 games. This year has 9 goals and 42 points in 57 games. So he's doing right around where he was last year, maybe a tad bit worse, but not overly bad. So this is a fantastic pickup there for the Stars. I mean, Bertucci was, like I said, a late second-round pick. Looked like he's going to be a very fantastic player for the Stars. I mean, he's a left-shot defenseman, so hopefully he's another young defenseman that this team can use to try and improve this team for the future. I mean, they already have Kyrou and Bichelle, who are going to be coming up in the not-too-distant future. Now you have Bertucci to that mix. I mean, that defense is starting to look pretty scary for the Dallas Stars, so a really good pickup there for the Stars as they sign one of their young defensemen to a new ELC. And then we also saw the New York Rangers sign goaltender Hugo Olas, who was a 2020 7th-round pick for the New York Rangers. They signed him to a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $155,000, and deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, Olas was another guy who was playing over in the NCAA. Last year, a pretty decent record, putting up a 2.31 GAA and 915 save percentage in 21 games. This year, also played 21 games, not as good, putting up a 2.84 GAA and a 908 save percentage. So not fantastic, but definitely not overly bad this year. So I think eventually he could maybe have a future as like a backup goaltender for the Rangers. So that's a pretty good sign there for the Rangers. I mean, it was a 7th-round pick. If he ever amounts to anything at the NHL level, I think they'd be happy with that. So signing to his ELC is fantastic, and hopefully Olas can make the most of his opportunity there with New York Rangers. So very good stuff there for New York and Olas. But those are the 3 signings we have over the past couple of days. Olas signs a 2-year ELC with the Rangers and signs over there. Bertucci signs a 3-year ELC with the Stars and re-signs there. And the Canucks signed Christian Felton to a 1-year ELC. So some pretty good signings there. Not overly huge, important signings that we've had over the past couple of days, but still some pretty good signings there from over the past few days. Going over to a quick look here at the waiver update part of the video. There's no waivers. After Gruen was placed on waivers, I think it was back over on Tuesday. There's been no players placed on waivers, so we have nothing to talk about in that situation. Going over to a quick look at the injury update here from the past couple of days. Lots of interesting injury notes from the past few days. Gabe Vilardi has a spleen injury. He's going to be out for an indefinite period of time, so it's a horrible blow for the Jets to lose one of their top 6 forwards for the next little while. Kalyanko has a hand injury. He's going to be out week to week. Horrible blow there for the Leafs. Adam Boqvist, upper body injury, out for an period of time, so that's an all-full injury there for the Jackets. Spencer Stastny has an upper body injury, is out week to week for the Predators, so that's a young defenseman the Predators won't have in their lineup. Then you also see McTavish and Gudas both have injuries. McTavish a lower body injury, Gudas upper body injury, and both going to be out for an period of time, so some pretty bad injury updates there. We also saw guys like Mark Scheifele in Winnipeg, Bortuzzo in New York I, Martin in NYI, Carrier in Vegas, and Protest in Washington all be cleared to play and should either have gone back into game action already or be back in not-too-distant future. So some really interesting injury updates there from the past couple of days. I mean, good to see guys like Scheifele go back. Carey go back, Protest go back. Good to see all those guys recover from the injuries. Bad news to see guys like Buchnevich and Vatrano go down. Bad news to see guys like Jarnkrok go down. And definitely for Vilardi, that's a horrible blow to see him be out for an indefinite period of time. So lots of bad blows there on the injury front. Hopefully those guys who are injured right now can get back before the season ends. So some interesting stuff there. And lastly here, going over to a quick look at how things are shaping up coming out of the NHL's trade deadline. So lots of interesting news and notes that came out of the trade deadline. So I want to talk about a couple of things here. First, with the Blues and the Ducks. Now, two guys who were on my list of players to be dealt around at the deadline, who never got around to being dealt, were two guys who had a term, who are wingers, who could score a lot, and those guys were Buchnevich and Vatrano. Now, both those guys were pretty good players. Both the Ducks and the Blues liked those guys, so keeping them I don't think was overly surprising. But I was expecting there to be some sort of potentiality there that they would get moved. They did not, so I do wonder if we do see something about Buchnevich and Vatrano in the offseason. Now, they're both going to be eligible for extensions as of July 1st, so I wonder if one of those two or both of them wind up signing an extension with their current team to stay in either Anaheim or St. Louis for longer. I could definitely see Buchnevich and the Blues work out on an extension, but if they can't, do we potentially see a Buchnevich or a Vatrano trade in the offseason? And I know the value of those guys could be very, very good. I know the Blues have not looked overly great this year. They're still in the playoff race, but still they haven't looked overly great. The Ducks, they definitely could have been looking better. They are one of the worst teams in the NHL, one of the worst teams in the Western Conference, so they're not looking overly well right now, so they could definitely try and improve this rebuild to try and make it go a little bit faster. So I could definitely see Vatrano and Buchnevich be moved, and I was thinking out of the realm of possibility we could see that in the offseason, so it's going to be an interesting situation to watch out for. But Buchnevich I think was number 1 on my board. Vatrano I think was top 15, so both those guys were guys who I thought was going to get moved by the Anaheim Ducks and St. Louis Blues. They never did, so now I do really wonder if in the offseason they either get extended, which is a possibility, or they wind up getting moved, which I think is also a possibility. So we'll have to wait and see on those two top 6 wingers, but that's interesting to note there. Going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins and Calgary Flames. Now, we saw these two teams sell off a ton of pieces at the deadline. I mean, if you look at what they did, Pittsburgh moved Chad Ruhwedel, moved Magnus Hellberg, moved Jake Gensel. All 3 guys were pending UFAs. If you look at what the Flames did, since the season started, they've moved off Zadorov, they moved Lindholm, Tanev, Hanifin, all those guys are pending UFAs. Now, these teams are not doing overly well now. They could be looking to enter either a rebuild or a small retool. And if they are going to do that, how many more pieces are going to be going out of those two organizations? Now, if you look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, they don't have too much that's probably going to move. I know there's a lot of talk out there that Crosby could potentially be moved, or he's probably going to walk as a free agent. I think Crosby probably stays. I've heard Elliot Friedman say that quite some time, and I think he'll probably wind up remaining in Pittsburgh. So I don't see Crosby getting moved or Malkin, but there are definitely a lot of other guys. I mean, do they move Riley Smith, who's going to be entering the final year of his deal? Do they move Russ or Raquel, who are on a bit more long-term deals, both having 4 more years left after this year, but are really good top 6 forwards? Do they consider moving guys like Achari or Eller, who are not working out overly good in the bottom 6? So could they move those guys? Could the Penguins also move Erik Karlsson? We'll get to that in a second, but that's a name that's been popping up. Could they move a guy like Marcus Pettersson, who's also going to be entering the final year of his deal? Could they move a guy like Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who hasn't had the best of seasons? Could they move on from Tristan Jarry? I highly doubt that, but could they move on from Matt Nieto, who's going to be entering the final year of his deal? Definitely. There's going to be some interesting players who could definitely be moved by Penguins. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that a lot of these guys get moved, but I could definitely see Smith be moved in the offseason, Pettersson be moved in the offseason. I do wonder about Erik Karlsson. There's definitely a couple of guys out on this roster who I think could wind up getting moved by Pittsburgh. And I think the big question is exactly how deep does this sort of retool rebuild go for Pittsburgh Penguins? So I do think we're going to have to watch out for our Penguins. I think they got a couple pieces done, but not as much as I was expecting. So I definitely do expect the Penguins to continue to sell off pieces into the offseason. So that's going to be interesting to note. Going over to the Calgary Flames, for them, they could definitely move off some more pieces. I mean, if you look at their forward group, 3 guys in particular are going to be pending UFAs, not this upcoming offseason, but the following offseason. And if those guys are pending UFAs, I could definitely see the Calgary Flames move them. That's Mangiapane, that's Sharon Govich, and that's Kuzmenko. Now, I know Sharon Govich has worked out quite well, and I think they'd probably rather extend him. Mangiapane's been up and down, and I wondered if they would potentially extend him. Kuzmenko's not been overly great in Calgary, but he's actually worked out quite well. So I wonder if he tries to remain in Calgary, but the Flames may want to move these guys. I'm not sure if they even want to sign in Calgary or not. So Mangiapane, Sharon Govich, and Kuzmenko, I think, could all be moved at some point next year. Does anyone look at trying to add Blake Coleman? He has a $4.9 million cap hit for this year plus 3 more. So could the Flames move him? I think that's a potentiality. Could the Flames move Rasmus Rasmus Andersson. That was a guy who was being talked about just closer to the deadline. He's got this year plus 2 more seasons at $4.55 million. Is a top pair right out defenseman, and I do really wonder if there's a team or two out there who try and add Anderson, so I could see him be moved to. Markstrom, that's going to be a name to watch out for in the offseason. I mean, he's got 2 more seasons left after this year at $6 million. There was a lot of talk about him being moved before a deadline, so I do wonder if that's a possibility of him being moved in the offseason. So those are 2 cities that I think we have to watch out for in the offseason, because after moving a couple pending UFAs to close out the trade deadline portion of the season, I think there's a very likely chance that those 2 teams continue to move off pieces going into the offseason. I think it's very likely we could see guys like Pittsburgh move Pedersen, Smith, Rust, Raquel, Achari, Eller. Pedersen, I do wonder about Erik Karlsson. We could see the Flames move off guys like Markstrom, Anderson, Mangiapane, Kuzmenko, Sharangovich, potentially guys like Coleman too. So I think those 2 teams are going to be 2 of the more interesting teams we have to watch out for, because after only moving UFAs before trade deadline, those 2 teams are going to have a lot of big questions to answer in the offseason. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Ottawa Senators, could we see them make a significant trade to try and improve this team and make it a little bit better for next year? Now, there was a lot of talk about the Senators moving Jacob Chychrun or Thomas Chabot before a trade deadline. I know I had Chychrun on my list. I think it was somewhere between like 16 and 20 on my trade day list. So Chychrun was an interesting name that I thought could have gotten moved. There was a lot of talk that with the Senators not having a long-term extension for him, not being able to talk about one until next year, they may try and move him given the fact of his uncertain future, but he wound up staying. So now there's a big speculation about what will happen with all his defense in the offseason. I don't think they want to go forward with 3 left shot defensemen on their roster. I mean, they have Sanderson, Chabot, Chychrun. I mean, one can play this offside. It's not an awfully big deal, but I do think they would rather have another solid right shot defenseman instead of 3 solid left shot defensemen. So it's going to be interesting to see. They're not moving Sanderson. That's definitely a guarantee. But I've seen a lot of people talk over the past couple of days that could we see a Chychrun move or a Chabot move in the offseason? I think it's quite likely. I mean, as of July 1st, Chychrun can talk an extension with the Senators. I think he'll get a huge raise from what he's making. Now, exactly what he's going to earn, I mean, I'm not sure. I think he could get somewhere between like maybe $7.5 million on a new deal. I'm not exactly sure if he's going to get north of $8 million, but I do think he's going to get quite a big raise. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens with Chychrun, but I think the Chychrun stuff is also going to decide what happens with Chabot. I mean, there's a lot of people I've seen out there who say that maybe don't move Chychrun, maybe sign Chychrun and move Chabot. I think that's a possibility too. Chabot's a really good top 4 defenseman. I know he's making $8 million, but I think there'll be a ton of teams out there interested in him. Just that there's a lot of teams out there interested in Chychrun. So I really do wonder if we see a potential Ottawa Senators deal as they move one of their top end left shot defenseman and try and bring in a right shot defenseman. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what sort of right shot defenseman could be available at this point in time, but 2 names that really come to mind. One is Erik Karlsson, who I've seen been linked to Ottawa for quite some time thanks to Elliot Friedman. He was just speculating, but there seems to be a lot of fans out there who would love to see Karlsson back in Ottawa, so I think it'll be a difficult trade to pull off. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that Pittsburgh does that, but I do think it's interesting to note that they could wind up seeing a reunion in Ottawa with Erik Karlsson. On top of that, I could also see him trying to target a guy like Anderson in Calgary. I mean, he's a right shot defenseman. He's got a couple more years left on his deal. He could be a really solid top pair defenseman for them, and he plays the right side. So I really do wonder about the Senators going after a guy like Rasmus Anderson. So it's going to be interesting to see watch out for. I wonder what other guys, right shot defenseman, could be available this offseason. If you think you know someone who could definitely be available, who I'm forgetting, who could really help that top 4 in Ottawa, definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know down in the comment section below. But this is a team who I think really needs another top 4 right shot defenseman. I don't think they can run off of 3 left shot defensemen. I think whether it's Chychrun or whether it's Chabot, they're probably going to move one in the offseason in order to improve the right side of the defense. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But some interesting news there to see Ottawa potentially linked to a guy like Erik Karlsson, or could potentially go after Rasmus Anderson if they were able to move Chychrun or Chabot, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly here, going over to the goalie carousel that will be happening this offseason. Now, about 2 to 3 weeks ago, before a deadline, there was a lot of talk about lots of big goaltenders being moved. So this being a really unprecedented time with, you don't usually see big goalies being moved, but there was guys like Gibson out there, Markstrom was out there, Ullmark was out there, Saros was out there. There was lots of big starting level goaltenders that were out there and available on the trade market. I mean, Ullmark, Ullmark was probably the biggest non-trade of the trade deadline. I mean, there was a lot of talk that he was going to go to LA. Some other people said Colorado, but I think it was LA who was probably the team who was trying to push hardest for Ullmark, and Ullmark blocked a trade there. Apparently, it sounds like he has a modified no trade clause, and it sounded like LA was on his list, so he didn't want to waive to go there. So that's an interesting move there for the Boston Bruins, and it does seem like Ullmark and the Bruins relationship is starting to get a little bit strained. I know that Ullmark and Swayman have been a fantastic tandem for quite some time now, and they've been a really good duo there in Boston, but I don't think they can continue to pay Ullmark over $5 million if they're going to have to give a Swayman an extension that probably looks north of $6 or $7 million. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens there, but after Ullmark almost got traded at the trade deadline by the Boston Bruins, I do really wonder if we see Ullmark get dealt in the offseason. But I know that there was a lot of interesting stuff about Ullmark not being dealt by a deadline, but the offseason is going to be an interesting offseason for goaltenders. I mean, if you look around the NHL, there are a handful of starting level goaltenders who could be had for the right price. I mean, John Gibson, he's probably going to get moved. The Ducks have Dostal. I think they can run with a 1A, 1B tandem, with Dostal being the 1A and a new guy being the 1B who can take a little bit of starts off of Dostal and sort of ease him into the starter's role. And I don't think they need to pay $6.4 million goaltender in Gibson to be their 1B goaltender, so I wouldn't be surprised if Gibson gets moved in the offseason. We know this relationship is strained between Markstrom and the Calgary Flames. I mean, there's no guarantee he gets moved and maybe he stays in Calgary, but I know that there's a lot of strain on that relationship now, and I do wonder if he gets moved. I mean, that team needs to play Wolf at the NHL level more consistently instead of just calling him up whenever one of the other two are injured. So I do think Markstrom is a very lucky candidate to get moved in the offseason. Saros, he was potentially a guy who could have been moved. Then the Predators started going on a tear and now in a playoff race. They didn't want to give him up, so they kept him for this year. But he's going to have entering the final year of his deal next year. I mean, they have Askarov. I think they would like to keep Askarov at the NHL level next year. So I would not be overly surprised if they moved Saros at some point, maybe around the draft, and try and get whatever they can for him so the team can have a run with Saros. So it'll be interesting to see there, but that's going to be interesting to watch out for. And then, of course, Linus Ullmark. I mean, there's a lot of talk that there was a couple of teams out west like LA and Colorado who had interest. There was also a couple of teams that I mentioned that from the east that were targeting Ullmark. I do wonder about teams like Jersey and Ottawa's teams who could have been targeting Ullmark. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there with Ullmark. I don't think he wants to go from Boston, but I think they probably won't have a choice. And I think that after almost being dealt right now, before a trade deadline, I do think it's quite possible that we could see an Ullmark trade in the offseason. So you got Gibson, Markstrom, Ullmark, and Saros for really starter level caliber goaltenders who can play at the very least 60 games a season, if not potentially a couple more games. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the offseason, but the offseason goalie carousel is going to be one to watch this offseason. I think there's going to be a lot of pieces being moved. Like I said, Gibson is probably expendable now with the Dostal playing the way he is. Ullmark's probably expendable with Swayman most likely getting an extension and a raise. Markstrom's expendable with them needing Wolf at the NHL level, and also Saros is expendable with the way Askarov's playing over in the AHL right now. So with all of those young guys, Askarov, Wolf, Swayman needing a new extension, and Dostal playing overly well, I think there's a very lucky chance those four goalies are getting moved, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of teams try and target those guys. I mean, I could see LA have some interest. I could see Colorado. Apparently they're one of the teams interested in Ullmark. I do wonder if they have some interest in potentially adding another goaltender. I do wonder about teams like Ottawa, New Jersey in the East. So definitely, there are a handful of teams out there who I think could use a starting level goaltender. I think this is going to be an offseason to watch out for some starting level goaltender movement. So definitely, let me know your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. That's what I'm going to talk about for today. What do you think about the goalie market? Is there going to be a lot of goaltenders who end up switching teams in the offseason, a lot of starting level goaltenders, or do you think it'll probably be a little bit less likely? So definitely let me know your guys' thoughts on that. What do you think about Ottawa? Do they add a right shot defenseman in the offseason? Could they move a guy like Chychrun or Chabot to try and make that happen? Definitely let me know your guys' thoughts on that. What do you think about the Penguins and the Flames? Do they continue to move off pieces in the offseason? Could we see a Penguins deal guys like Smith, Pettersson, Carlson, others? Could we see the Flames deal guys like Anderson, Mangiapane, Sharangovich, Kuzmenko, amongst others? Definitely have to get your thoughts on who you think could be moved by the Flames and the Penguins in the offseason. And on top of that, what do you think about Buchnevich and Vatrano? Is it possible those two guys want to get moved in the offseason? Is it possible those two guys want to be resigning in the offseason? Or do you think it's a little bit of both? And what do you think will happen with those two players? Do you think they'll resign? Do you think they'll get moved? Or do you think they'll just go into the final year of their contract with their current teams? Definitely. Love your guys' thoughts on all that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk about for today. We're going to this video, and if you're really trying to subscribe down below, thank you for all your support on the real truth of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, and if you leave a comment down in the comment section below, so I was discussing today's video. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So if you check that out, leave a link to that in the description below, and I can't see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.